See, what happened was last night.
Yeah, you were talking about the chairs falling down.
Yeah. Daryl, he was standing right here, and I was standing over here. What happened was, it was kind of neat. These chairs here were stacked up on top of this chair. I was standing like right here. And all of a sudden, that table shifted, and all this stuff came flying down behind me. And Daryl's standing over there looking at me, and he goes, "Did you do that?" And I'm like, "Hell no, I didn't."
How much time had elapsed before that happened?
We'd been in here for about an hour doing EVP work, and then the group had moved back to the back part back here. This is the creepy part.
Yeah, the last time we were here, the lights were on, so we only came to this point where we are now.
But they were back here in the very back.
Oh, there's that heaviness feeling.
Oh yeah. They were sitting right over in here behind all these chairs doing an EVP session in there. And we were up front. So while they were back here doing EVP stuff, we were up there. And they were all back here, and then everything started happening up there.
So is this closes off the building right here?
Yeah, this is the actual end of the building.
Okay.
And how old is this building?
This building's been around for a while. I mean, this is the old kitchen for the restaurant back here, but this building was a milking barn probably 100 years ago.
Because from what Joanne says, this is the
Yeah.
original foundation
Yeah.
from whoever lived here. prior.
Yeah, the building itself was redone on the original footprint of the barn. This isn't a barn, but the floor is the original floor to the barn. It's like a cement floor.
Just like I definitely feel that heaviness. It was more pronounced when we walked that way.
Yeah.
Not so much in here, more over there. We were just talking about what happened last night as far as they had a ghost tour here going on last night at Victoria's Black Swan Inn. And David Rountree here was telling us a little about his experience and what happened here. Over here to our right, there's a stack of chairs, and he was standing over there. And that stack of chairs over there happened to tip over in the moment that he was standing there.
Yeah, that
and
was a
he
startling
did
moment.
not move the actual chairs. So the other people that were here standing to this left where it is completely empty were questioning whether he had done that himself. And he, of course, said he had not. So we are now sitting in the milk barn, infamous milk barn here at Victoria's Black Swan Inn, just trying to see if we experience anything that, somebody else might not experience.
Yep.
Again, like I said, more towards that way was the heaviness that I felt that I talked about last time. And if you look at our previous episode and us being here, you can definitely get a sense of, like this weight that's on top of you. So that's definitely something to look forward to.
Yeah, the air is very oppressive in here. And one of the differences in the house, in this structure, is that the house has a lot of feminine energy in it. It's a lot of, even though there were some pretty nasty deaths from disease and that sort of thing there, the energy in the house is just a lot more mellower than the energy in here. The energy in here tends to be more masculine, but it's also very, when it becomes active, it is very aggressive, and there's a certain sexual nature to it. A lot of the women that were here last night felt a very heavy uneasiness when activity started occurring, because they were picking up that vibration, that I don't know what you want to call it, chemistry or whatever, that was coming out from the energy. And it made a lot of the women uncomfortable, and understandably so. I mean...
Again, that's what I was explaining to him the last time we were here, is that I was the only female in here. It was myself and
you
him.
were the center of attention.
Exactly. It was myself, him, and another male cameraman. And I felt, like I said, again, a heaviness, a weight that was just on top of me. And as soon as the men started talking, it's like that went away. And I was like, all right, it's gone. Let's go. There's no reason for us to stay here, because obviously they're not interested in what you have to say, as a male. But had I spoken or said something, that would have been a different story.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing. I think that's why the chairs were like knocked over in my direction. They either perceived me as a threat or a barrier between the ladies that were here last night and themselves.
Right.
This is one of the things that I do, even though I do the scientific aspect of it, when I go into a dwelling that's active, I have certain things on me for protection, but I also, generate this white light that I just envision is permeating the whole building, and it makes a lot of that stuff very uncomfortable. But it keeps people from being messed with personally. I mean, people were touched last night. People experienced physical and emotional experiences based on the activity that was in here, but nobody got hurt. Nobody, felt threatened at any time. But it does have an air of oppression about it, and you noticed it when you were in here before.
So when you said that you keep something on you to protect yourself, what is that? Is there something specific that you keep on yourself?
Oh Lord, I have all sorts of things around my neck. I have a great deal of significant things hanging around my neck that
I noticed that.
were gifted to me. I don't buy these things, but people will gift me with certain things, and the act of giving it imbibes power into that item. An old Native American tradition is to give things away. They have a giveaway, and the act of giving an item to someone puts power in it. The power of the generosity of the act of giving, and that power is harnessable by a shaman to utilize in manipulating the environment. So I have a protection necklace that I actually made that literally has all of the talismans from the Key of Solomon that are protections from evil, protections from demonic influences. They're all protection talismans on there. It's kind of like a little turbocharged, protection necklace. But I carry that with me. I have several stone pendants. One of them is moldavite, which moldavite is a stone that originates near Czechoslovakia, and it comes from a single meteorite strike that took place about 10,000 years ago. So there's a very limited quality or quantity of this stuff around, and the cost of it now has elevated almost to the cost of diamonds because it's so rare.
So can you verify something for me that I have been told? I grew up very New Age and into meditation and reincarnation and all of those things, and the whole philosophical thing behind, like you said, stones and the protection of different crystals and things like that.
Right.
I have been told, and this has happened to me several occasions, where I have a quartz crystal, and either which it has broken or it has just been completely lost. And I've been told that's because it has absorbed a lot of negative energy, and it's a good thing that it has been broken or lost, because it's taking away the negative that you have absorbed and getting rid of it. And so I noticed that you had a quartz hanging on your neck. So is that something that you can elaborate on and kind of
Quartz,
expand on what happens with that?
Quartz is a traditional stone used by shamans probably all over the world. The idea is because it has so much energy inside of it. Quartz is associated with something called the piezo effect, which is a discharge of energy. Years ago, the ancient shamans in North America, and probably in northern Mexico, would go out with a large quartz crystal, and they would slam it against a rock as hard as they could. Well, if it didn't shatter, it was a good omen for the tribe, and it meant that there would be a prosperous year. There would be good crops. There would be good hunting. There would be good food supply. However, if it shattered, it was a bad omen because it meant that bad luck would befall the tribe. But when it would shatter, it generally went off like a grenade because it would discharge 50 to 60,000 volts of stored up electricity in it, and it was very detrimental to the shaman. So it was certainly bad luck for the shaman if one shattered. But in your case, something you should always do with your stones is periodically you should cleanse them to get rid of that negative energy so they don't shatter. And the easiest way to cleanse them is to take the stone, put it into spring water, or bottled spring water. It's easy to get nowadays. Put your stone in it, sprinkle some sea salt in it, about a tablespoon of sea salt, and then leave it out in a full moon and let it be in the light of the full moon all night. And that'll cleanse all that negative energy out of the stone. Awesome. So if you do that, your stones will last a lot longer. And also, if someone handles your stone it's very easy for them to put their own energy into it just by handling it.
Exactly. I have always been one to don't touch my crystal. You know,
Exactly.
I've known that you don't want to touch
That's
another
right.
person's, if it's on their person, you don't touch it,
That's
because
right.
that brings
Because
something on. You're transferring energy from one source
That's
to
exactly
another.
right.
And so I've always known that anybody's like, oh, I like that, don't touch it. That's like my immediate response, don't touch it.
That's
And I
exactly right.
remember an experience very recently where I just bought a brand new crystal from a woman. We have a First Friday here in San Antonio, a little kind of like today, a little market, and she was selling her stones, and I bought a crystal, and she's the one that informed me about all this information about how it breaks with when certain energy encounters it. And I had gone out to meet my mom for something, and I was wearing the necklace. When I got to my mom, the necklace, I'd lost the crystal, but I found it inside the car. And then I went to eat, and I put it on a separate necklace. By the time we left the restaurant, I had lost it again. And so I just kind of said, okay, you know,
Time
like
for it
I'm
to
good.
go.
Yeah, I said it's time to go.
Time for it to go.
Yeah, and I just kind of left it at that. And I have the only one I have left that I've kept for about 3 or 4 years. I've kept it because I keep it in my wallet in a sealed pocket that I never open.
Yeah.
I never put anything in there. I don't put money in that pocket. I don't put, you know, a person's business card, anything. It's in its own place where it belongs.
Well, it's always good, too, to cleanse a crystal periodically, even whether you use it or not, because stones can also pick up residual energy around you. So even if someone doesn't handle it, it's a good idea to every once in a while. Like, I cleanse my stuff once a month during the full moon. I just take everything, put it in a bowl, put the water in, put it in the stall, stick it out in the full moon, and get it the next morning. And it's like an ounce of protection is worth a pound of cure. You know, if you do that, your crystals are always going to be cleansed. As soon as you touch them, they're going to be, you know, infused with your own energy. So it's not like you're taking any energy away from them. What you're doing is getting rid of the residual, you know, energy that clings to you or is hovering around you or trying to influence you in some way.
Is
So-
there something in particular, like I said, I grew up New Age and things like that. I was born in February, so my birthstone is amethyst, and I always keep in my pockets, and especially more recently, I've kept a lot of amethyst, quartz crystal, rose crystal, tiger's eye, things like that. And even with Dave here, he was feeling really sick not too long ago, and I gave him my tiger's eye, and I said, hey, just keep this on you. This is going to provoke a certain type of energy. Is there
Sure.
something that you can say that is more preventative towards, you know, keeping certain things away or even promoting something beneficial to yourself as far as stones go?
Yeah, there's something to the idea of stones and being helpful to you. The thing is that scientifically I can tell you that a stone resonates at its own frequency. Every stone has its own resonance. And
Is that based on the size of it or just the actual
it's based on the
type?
composition of the material, you know, what type of stone or crystal it is, and also on the size. The size has a lot to do with the resonance as well. But the thing is that our bodies has its own resonant. You know, you have your own resonant frequency. I have my own resonant frequency. Dave has his own resonant frequency. It's very individualized. So when you go to pick a stone, you really let the stone pick you. You pick up several different stones,
Right.
and you'll know the right one. It'll feel right. You just kind of clear your head a little bit, try to shut off all the internal dialogue that's going on, and you start to handle the stones. And one will stick out to you that feels much better than the rest, and that's the stone you buy, because that's the stone that's resonating at your resonance.
Right.
And, you know, using a combination of things, of different stones for different things, is always good. I carry a medicine bag on me that has 10 or 12 different stones in it. And they're small little stones and everything. But each of them has a metaphysical meaning to it, from everything from protection to increasing your perception to, you know, making you more aware to protecting you from evil or protecting you from different spirits. So you carry a medicine bag with all these different stones in there as a precaution. And it doesn't mean that something's going to come at you, but it's kind of like insurance if something does.
Right.
You know, it just makes it a little bit harder for something to mess with you. In the end, it's you against whatever's coming after you, but, you know, every little thing you can hedge your bet a little bit with, it's just a good precaution to do.
So there's something like, let's say, you know, I didn't know the stuff that I know. And I just, we recently went to the snake farm here in New Braunfels, Texas, and there was a pit that just had a whole bunch of stones in there. And like you said, you resonate on something, you just pick up something and you pick up what attracts you. I was there for about 15 minutes just going, I don't like this doesn't feel right. And eventually it was, you get a bag for $5 with whatever you can fit in this bag. And so I grabbed from small stones to large stones, just anything that would, like you said, resonate towards my own presence. And I came out with the most eclectic collection that I have had. Because it was everything from, like I said, amethyst to quartz to malachite to tiger's eye to all of that stuff. And it's just, with every person it's different. Like you said, it resonates a different energy. It resonates a different perspective in their mind of what it is they're trying to get out of it. And I can definitely identify with that because, like you said, I was there for 20 minutes. And I was sitting there just, going, this doesn't feel right. And the one that I got that really resonated the most was an amethyst that was not completely in a rock form that you would normally see in a store that you buy. It was still coarse, like it needed to be grinded down. And so that was the one that really struck me the most. That was like, I need to grab that one because it has a type of the word that's coming to my mind is insecurity, because that's kind of like what figures to me with amethyst. But it was more like of a, it just needs shaping to it. You know what I mean? It need to be molded.
It's as individualized as a fingerprint. And literally, you can go into a rock shop and you can handle 1,000 rocks and not find one. And yet you can go into another place and the first stone you pick up, is right. I mean, it's just a matter of finding the right vibration for you. And once you get the hang of it and understand what you're feeling, it's a lot easier to do it, than when you're not real sure what you're doing and you're just kind of picking up stones. Because you really have to let go and kind of shut off the outside world and feel what the stone's doing for you. And, it's hard for a lot of people to do that in this day and time because we have so much distraction bombarding us constantly in civilization, that it's hard to shut down and just feel something. And part of the path of being a shaman is understanding how to shut that down, how to cut off this internal voice in your head that's constantly talking to yourself, and capitalizing off that silence. And we call it the power of silence. When you cut off that internal dialogue, the rest of your senses become very enhanced, and it's a whole lot easier to pick things out. To feel the vibration of that rock, to feel whether it's right or not. One of the first exercises you learn when you're becoming a shaman is to learn where to find your ideal place, the place for you to sit where you're at your best in a room. Because there's two types of places when you go into an area. There's a very beneficial space, which is where you want to be sitting, and there's a very non-beneficial space, which is where you don't want to be sitting. And one of the first lessons in becoming a shaman is learning how to find your spot. Learning how to find the place where you're at your best. Because you always want to be sitting in a place of power to protect yourself and to be able to protect others around you. In this room, this is my spot where I'm sitting right now. I found it last night when I came in here. So I'm sitting in my spot in this area so that I'm at my best if anything happens. But that's like the first lesson you learn, learning how to perceive good versus not so good. You sit in a spot that's your detrimental spot, you can get ill, you can get sick, you can actually get dizzy, not feel well, feel almost like you're coming down with the flu with symptoms. And yet you can sit in your good spot and you're elated, you're full of energy, you're relaxed, you're where you need to be. So these are lessons in perception.
So could you relate that to, most people are familiar with the term feng shui, in which the way that you put things in your room, and you can, the energy flow goes in a circle depending on how things are sitting. Would you kind of say that that's similar?
Yeah, it's very similar because you want the energy to flow through you to energize you, not to, de-energize you, not to drain you of your energy. You want to be sitting in a place where you're gathering energy. where you're literally charging up. Because this whole game, I mean, the things we do here, we're dealing with energy. This energy can manifest itself in a variety of different ways. But the bottom line is, anytime you're dealing with a disembodied consciousness, which is what I prefer to call it, I don't call it a ghost. Ghost is such a folkloric term with a wide variety of definitions to it. We're dealing with a disembodied consciousness, something that's intelligent, that has no corporeal form, and yet is present through radiating its energy and propagating it in the environment around us. So the only way to deal with energy is with energy. You can repel it with energy, you can attract it with energy, depending on, you know, what mode you're in or what state of mind you're operating in. So when we're dealing with energy, we have to utilize energy to do that. And a lot of people don't understand that.
So you mentioned earlier in an interview we had that you have a book coming out recently where you're dealing with some type of demonic spirit.
Yeah.
What comes of the differences between what you experienced here last night, as far as the stories we've heard of, you know, of Henry being the man that's in charge of the milk barn, and he's very in touch with women and doesn't really like men.
Right.
What is the difference between that and as far as the feelings that you get in dealing with something that's maybe not so dangerous versus something to where you would call demonic in that term?
Well, the interesting thing about it is our bodies are much smarter than our brains are. When we come into contact with something that is demonic, for example, and believe me, in spite of what you see on TV, a demonic encounter is extraordinarily rare. I mean, sure, it's very easy to come into contact with a disembodied consciousness that was just really, you know, a jerk or an angry troll-like human being. Well, in death, they're the same way. So they're going to be nasty, they're going to be crotchety, they're going to be aggravating, they're going to do things like they would when they were alive. There's no difference in their personality. But when you're in contact with something that's demonic, it's a completely different experience. It's like your body is repelled by it. You get revolted. You could get nauseated. You could smell things that are just nasty because it's stimulating your senses. The energy itself is literally stimulating your senses to the point of where you are experiencing things and perceiving things that is being triggered in your mind by this energy stimulating your perception. It's very oppressive. I mean, you mentioned you felt heavy back there when you were in there. If there was something demonic here, you wouldn't be able to walk in there.
Right.
Your body would just shut down, and you would be extraordinarily revolted by the feeling that would be emanating from that darkness in there. So your body recognizes things way before your brain does. And it's very important that when you're doing this sort of stuff, that you pay attention to what your body's telling you. Because your body has instincts that, you know, modern people are not in touch with their instincts anymore. You really have to go out and spend, you know, 3 or 4 months alone in the wilderness to get back in touch with your instincts. But when you listen to your body won't steer you wrong. If your body says run, you need to run.
So in this particular story that's coming out, is the book, is
Right.
it one story or is it a combination of stories that you are writing about?
This particular book that's coming out, Demon Street USA, is one story that took place in 1985 in Gainesville, Florida. And what happened was, I was in show business at the time. I was a technical director. I was doing lighting design. I was doing audio engineering. I was doing videography. I was doing a lot of different things, because in Florida, when you're in entertainment, you do anything that pays to get a job. But I was in the local union down there, the IATSE union in Gainesville. And this buddy of mine, we used to do shows together. He came to me and he said, you know, he says, I met a young lady and there's something really weird going on in her house. I think it's haunted. And I said, well, you know, let's go over there and check it out.
And at this time, how long had you been in the business?
Well, I had been a shaman, and in this particular story, it was in my shaman mode that this came to me, so I dealt with it as a shaman. But I had been trained as a shaman in 1972.
Okay, so you at least 10 plus years as far as dealing with the
Yeah,
supernatural and things of that nature.
I had been, you know, healing people for a couple of chickens and a dozen eggs. And, things like that for quite a while. But
I'm going to use that later. Stealing that.
well, that's how a shaman works. It's all
Right.
barter. You don't charge
Right.
somebody money to help them. You
Exactly.
help them, and then if they gift you with something, you graciously accept it, and that's payment.
Right.
And people pay you what they can. But like I say, you do a lot of work for a chicken and a couple of eggs or whatever, But that's okay. It's an exchange of gifts in a way. It's not about getting rich. It's about an exchange. Someone honoring you for doing something for them, and they honor you in return, and it's treated that way. You don't look at someone and say, only 2 eggs.
Right.
You thank them for 2 eggs.
Right.
Because that's what they can give.
So you're in Gainesville, and what exactly happened?
Well, we went onto this property, and of course, I immediately, when we stepped foot on the property, sensed that this was not a haunting, that it was something way more heinous going on here. And Robbie, who was with me, also sensed it. And there were a couple of things that happened that night that made power point Robbie out to me to make me know that he needed to be my apprentice. I needed to train him to be a shaman so that he could help in handling the situation, because as soon as we walked into it, I knew we were going to be the ones that had to deal with it. There was nobody else in Gainesville that could have dealt with this. So when we walked in, I immediately, and he wanted to become a shaman, he really did. I mean, he bugged me for months about training him to be a shaman, and I said, it's just not that easy. I said, I'm not the one that picks you. I said, power picks you. Power points you out. Well, that day, power pointed him out to me, and I knew then that I had to train him. But we went on the property. We were on the upstairs floor. Without giving too much of the book away, the woman had supernatural experiences that could not be explained. And when we went into her home, the first thing that happened is we watched a jalousie window, which requires you to crank a handle, and it has gearing and all kinds of mechanical things that control the window opening.
And again, this is in 1985 at the
Right.
time.
We watched the window open and the handle didn't turn. And yet when I went to close the window, I turned the handle and the window closed. So what we saw defied physics. There was absolutely no way with the mechanics in that window crank that window could have opened like it did without turning the crank. So I knew right then that we were dealing with something extraordinary. And there were other things that were going on, the feeling of oppression, the emotions fluttering through your mind, and visions of like killing yourself, things that were just really trying to run you away or to crush you emotionally. And it was at that point that I realized, there was something here that was beyond just your average ghost. And to make a long story short, we investigated it. We discovered the identity of the entity that was there. We found out who conjured it into existence. We went on a search, a quest, to find people that could help us or that could offer us advice. And it's a very interesting story. It's a rocket ride. The original story was over 78,000 words, and the publisher made us cut it down to 68,000, which is 10,000 words cut.
less, than an experience.
10,000 words cut from the story, and what it did was, is when we wrote the book originally, it's so intense, each scene is so intense that we would put a rest period for the reader to bring him down again, to bring him down so that you're not constantly stimulated. And we did that so it wouldn't be too intense, so people could read it. And we would interlace it with our actual dialogue, which was actually, we were very comical in dealing with this. We made jokes about it because it was the only way we could deal with the oppressiveness of it, was by making a levity kind of event out of it. But we had to cut all the breaks out. So now literally it starts with an intense situation and remains intense, boom, 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 through the whole book. There's no rest period. And it's a rocket ride. And I think that the publisher did that on purpose to make it intense so that people would pick it up and not be able to put it down. And we'll know the end of summer 2014 when it's released.
So
We just got the cover art and saw what the cover looks like, and it stands out. It's an incredible cover.
Is this still something that is a standing place that someone, if let's say they get your book and they want to go experience this, is it
Private
something
residence.
you can go?
Yeah, it's a private residence. The actual cover does not have the real house on it for obvious reasons,
Right.
because people are living in the house.
So
But
there's
the
people
house
that
does.
afterwards are residing in the house that did not originate there.
What was that again? I'm sorry.
The people that originally lived in the house are not living there. Are these new people that are living
No,
in the
the
house?
original owner of the house during this process died after the banishment of the demon.
Oh, okay, so there's a new residents living in this home currently.
Probably have no idea of the history of it.
Okay, but the original people, does that have something to do with the actual story, or was this just like health issues?
The original people that lived and owned the property, it was 3 houses on the property. The girl that came to us lived in one house. The landlord who owned the property lived in the front house. And then there was a back house, which was like a house on LSD. We went up into it, the walls were breathing. It was very oppressive. There were literally apparitions sitting in chairs watching you. I mean, it was a creep show, it really was. But what was impressive is when I walked into this guy's house, and he was a redneck. I mean, he had this, like these ball caps with the big brim, and big old mouthful of Red Man that he was chewing on. And the first thing out of his mouth was, "Can you conjure demons?" And I said, "Well, I could if I wanted to, but I just don't have any desire to do that." He said, "Well, I can." And that was the first impressive thing that came out of his mouth. When I walked into his home, in his den, he had bookshelves lining the entire den. There was no art hanging, there was nothing. It was all bookshelves everywhere, all the way around. And every square inch of those bookshelves were filled with books. And as I started to examine these books, I started noticing that some of them had leather covers. There were parchments, there was vellum, there was papyrus, there were ancient scrolls, and every one of these books was some type of either ancient grimoire or spell book, or some type of work of magic and conjuring. And some of the titles are very rare books, and the value of these books alone, monetarily, just for their age and their antiquity, was several $1 million.
And is this in a negative context or just in a general
Some of them
context?
were negative. Some of them were negative. Some of them were just general type spell books that are very famous and mentioned, and like Roger Bacon's writings. Some of these spell books weren't even believed to be in existence. And this guy has a copy of this handwritten on parchment spell book, leather bound, that I thought was a legend. And there it is on his bookshelf.
And again, this is back in 1985 when you're in the home.
Back in 1985.
Okay.
What my interest today is where did those books go?
Have you been back to this location? You said the book is about to come out in 2014. Obviously, that's almost 30 years later. Have you visited the residence?
Yes. I haven't been inside of it, but have driven by the outside of it and looked at it.
Is there a major difference from what you experienced back then to what
Yeah,
you saw
because
now?
because when we finished with the case, it was resolved. The activity was resolved. In other words, the demon that was there was banished.
Was gone.
He was gone. And all that was left was the fallout of the encounter. In other words, we literally blasted this thing into non-essential existence. And by doing that, it literally damaged the house. It blew all the paint off the house. All the paint had flaked off and was on the ground outside of it like snow.
Exterior paint?
Yeah. It literally blew the paint off the outside of the house. And the house is benign today. When we went by there, there's literally no activity going on there, because what was there was gotten rid of. But the whole idea that you can't get rid of these things forever, because someone can come along and conjure it back into existence again.
Right.
And what has happened is this book that's coming out is the first book of 3 potential books. The second book we have just finished living. We haven't written it yet. It ended 3 weeks ago. So
Wow.
the second book, the material for the second book has happened. And right now we're currently living the third book. And the third book is going to culminate this summer about the time when Demon Street's going to be released. And it's going to culminate in Nevada.
Awesome. Is there anything, like we talked about earlier in our interview, we talked about your experiences here at the Victoria Black Swan Inn. Is there anything you could potentially write about your experiences that you've encountered here last night, today? I don't know exactly how long you've been here, or how long you plan on being here,
Right.
but is there something that you can, for our viewers, let them know, kind of what you might experience if you come to this place?
The Black Swan Inn is a very beautiful place. The land itself is very warm and friendly. There's a lot, in spite of the fact that it's a battlefield here. The energy is very positive. It's very nurturing. I didn't have any issues with it at all here. And the spirits that are active on the property, they're not bad people. They're not evil. There's nothing wrong with them. They're people that live normal lives that died here. And because they died here, for whatever reason, they return here. Some of them have attachments to the property, which is totally understandable after spending, 3 days out here every waking moment I had. I can understand how they would be attached to it, because the land is just a warm, fuzzy feeling energy here. But the activity tends to be, quite different from the house versus the milking barn, like I told you earlier.
Which we currently are sitting in.
Yeah, the milking barn that we're sitting in now has a very strong, kind of nasty masculine energy in it that tends to be kind of sexual and semi-abusive to women. Where the house is primarily feminine spirits, even though there are a couple of male presences in there, but they're very laid back. You don't really notice them so much. The primary activity in there is from a little girl that we picked up the name last night, Elizabeth. And there's other activity associated with Joe's mother, who passed away from a bleeding ulcer.
Right, which she mentioned in our initial interview when we did the promo for tonight's event.
Well, because this event's kind of in honor of her mother.
Exactly.
And there's another woman who was beaten by her husband and was pregnant and shoved down a flight of stairs. And they listed, I think, the cause of death as a heart attack. But of course, we're pretty sure that she died from her injuries in the fall. Her presence is very...
Which is inside the interior of the original establishment.
The original house itself, yeah. And she's manifesting really down in the ballroom, the great room in the front. You feel her a lot there. And she also manifests up in Joe's bedroom upstairs. So there's a lot of activity there. It's mostly benign. Certainly nothing mean or evil. The milking barn is the exception to the rule. There's just a crotchety old guy out here that likes messing with women. But there's, he's not evil per se. He's more of a mischievous, grump than anything else.
Right.
But the activity's here, and last night everyone had a pleasant experience, in actually having a paranormal event occur to them and being able to witness it and experience it. So in that nature, the Black Swan Inn delivers.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David. We have a really good time just sitting here and conversing with you and getting to know a little bit about you and what it is that you do and the experience that you had here, and not necessarily here, but definitely about your past book and what's coming up. So definitely thank you for your time and being here with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for walking in my world.
Yeah, anytime. We're there.
So don't you feel better now?
I do. For
In
a
here?
second, I felt really cold,
Yeah.
and then I asked for Henry to come warm me up, and I felt kind of warm, and then all of a sudden I got really cold again. So.
Yeah. The energy in here shifted while we were doing
It did,
the
yeah.
interview.
Like I said, it was more back there.
Yeah.
And once you pass that little doorway, that's when it really hit. But in here, it's kind of calm now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it shifts.
Yeah.
It'll move from up here to back there constantly during
Yeah.
the night.
It's definitely a calm feeling right now. And like I said, when we were in here last time, immediately the pews were in the way, so we had to walk over the pews to get down on the floor. As soon as you touch the floor in this room where we are, as soon as my foot hit the ground, I felt that weight.
Yep.
I just felt this heaviness.
Very oppressive pressure.
Yes. And I was on that right side where you said where the chairs fell over.
Yep.
And I was standing over there, and Dave was on this side where you said your other friend was, And he started talking, going, hey, if you're here, blah, blah, blah.
And it
going
happened on your side.
Yeah, it happened on my side. But all of a sudden, it was like as soon as he started talking, I was like, okay, it's gone.
Yeah.
The weight went away. There's no reason to stay here. And we left.
Yeah, it is strange because literally almost nothing happens on this side of the building.
Yeah, it's on
Almost
that
everything
side.
happens on
Yeah.
that side of the building.
Yep.
And I'm not sure if it has something to do with the original configuration of the building when these people were alive or what. But I find it interesting that the stuff is over here and it's not over here.
Right.
And if it's not over here, then it's in the very back.
Right.
The whole time we were up here trying to do EVP sessions, it sounded like somebody was back there banging doors and walking around and throwing things around. We go back there, and then all of a sudden up here, it sounds like everybody's doing that.
Right.
So it's very mischievous,
Right.
the activity that's happening. And that's one of the things that I have found over the years of researching the paranormal is the stuff has intelligence because it's messing with you. I mean, it's literally messing with you.
Right. You know, that's what I was telling Andrea Perron earlier, as I was telling her about the activity that was going on in a house that I previously lived in, where you would hear the knocking very vigorously inside of the home. It
Right.
sounded very prominent, like somebody was at your door and they were trying to break your door in. And I would step outside of the home, and it would sound very silent from outside, like the noise was coming from inside of the home.
Definitely.
And I would not be able to go to sleep if my TV was not on, if I didn't have a light on, if I did not play my guitar and just soothe myself.
Right.
I would not be able to go to sleep. And it wasn't until I moved out of there, and actually not necessarily moved out of there, but actually acknowledged that there was something in my home, that I was able to move out of there.
Right.
You know, you have to acknowledge the presence of something, and then once you acknowledge it, accept it, and then be like, okay, I acknowledge that you're here. I'm going to move on and be on my way.
It's like anything else. If you honor the dead, then the dead will honor you. And I've always found when I go in to do a scientific investigation, I go in just, absolutely cold and objective, and there's just no interaction with the environment. And what that does is it angrifies the spirits, and they become more active. And that's the best way to capture data. It's not like we're stirring them up or we're sitting there and provoking them in any way, but we're not acknowledging their presence.
Right.
And when you do that, they tend to act out to try to get you to acknowledge their presence, and that's how you get good data. But then when I finish, I always, acknowledge them and honor them. It's a pleasure walking through your garden. See you later. And, head out the door, because that way you don't get something following you home and messing with you at home.
Right, and that's what I was telling Andrea, is that, I have an older son, or a younger son. He's 7 years old. He's my oldest. But we had experiences. I lived in Corpus Christi, that's 200 miles south of where we are right now.
Right.
And he would wake up in the middle of the night going, they're going to get Owen, they're going to get Owen, who's my youngest son, who's 5 now. And at the time, he would experience something necessarily not pleasant, you would say.
Right.
And once we got to where we were at the last house that I experienced something, he got to the point to where he would hear the knocking, and he would wake up and go, Mom, who's here?
Right.
And I would just say, nobody, just
Children-
go back to sleep.
Children also are very sensitive to it. Their perception is much greater than ours is, because the world isn't such and such and so to them, because we know the world is this or that because we've been told it and we believe it and we see it. In children, it's not that impressed upon them yet. So they still have that eye for magic and that eye for the unknown because of the make-believe that children go through. So they're more perceptive to this stuff than we are, because we tend to be, disrupted by, the news, everything going on around us, somebody's playing music, there's something going on and we're distracted. We're distracted by horns blowing and traffic and all these other things. And children are oblivious to all that. They're sitting in their own little world and they're playing with their imaginary friend. Well, guess what? Their imaginary friend may not be imaginary. So children are way more perceptive to this stuff than we are. And they lose it as they grow older, because as they grow older, they get conditioned just like we are to have things drowned out by our environment. But when they're young, they don't have that distraction because they're oblivious to that anyway. They're concentrating in their own little world, and that's when spirits come to them.
Do you have any type of advice for anybody that might be dealing with a child like that, to where maybe the parents don't believe what they're saying? Maybe they're just telling the child, "Oh, this is imaginary. You're not, you know, it's not part of what you're, the reality of it." You know, when they think that obviously it is a reality to them. Do you have any advice to the people that are dealing with kids that have what we call the crystalline children?
Right.
What would you have advice to parents for those children?
You want to encourage your children. You want to speak to them. You want to question them and find out what kind of detail they can provide on their experiences, because it may be that your child is a gifted child. Your child may have mediumship capabilities, or may be psychic in some way. And instead of shutting it down, which will cause a child health problems as an adult by suppressing this stuff, explore it with them and see if there's anything to it. And then encourage them to develop their gift to what they're going to do. People who have these gifts are special people. To try to shut it down or to smother it is detrimental to the child's health and to their health as they become an adult. 90% of the mediums that are out there today suffer from symptoms of fibromyalgia. And they do that because as they were growing up, it wasn't cool to be a medium, and their parents tried to shut them down, and they suppressed their energy, they suppressed their feelings, and then it manifested later in their life as symptoms of a disease that science can't even explain. And I'm looking at it, we've been playing around with mediums that have fibromyalgia symptoms, and we've been coming up with, you know, non-medical therapies that are helping them because it's an energy-based disease. And the idea is these mediums are taking on this energy by reading people or by communicating with the dead, and that energy is residual on them. And if the energy is in phase with their own biofield, their own energy, it's beneficial, they feel great. But if it's out of phase with their energy, they feel exhausted even though they're full of energy and they can't get out of bed for 2 or 3 days. So by draining that energy off of them, it's able to reset their body and eliminate some of those symptoms that they suffer from after doing a reading.
Awesome. So your encouragement to those that have children that are saying that I definitely see something, or I have this is my imaginary friend, you would definitely encourage that feeling of them.
You want to explore it.
Yeah, explore it, but in
Explore.
a healthy way. You know, if
Exactly.
it's something that scares them, you definitely want to
Right.
feel that. But if it's something like, oh, hey, I have a friend here, you know, we want to go out and
Exactly.
play, you definitely want to explore that and get to know what is beyond that experience and
Question your children,
where they are.
understand what they're going through, communicate with them.
Awesome. All right, David. Well, again, thank you very much. We appreciate all of this. We've had a really good time hanging out here. So thanks again for all of your help and all of your knowledge, because there's a
Sure.
lot of people that have these questions and they don't have any answers to it. And you just answered a lot of questions.
Thanks.
Thanks, David.
My pleasure.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.